Hey, Link here. Thanks for joining me for episode 106 and New Game Plus episode 3, where I speak with Dan Morris. In this episode, we talk about who they are and what they do, going from Reload magazine to being the head of Fearzine, his horror genre preferences, words of wisdom from his experiences, the game that made him interested in the industry, finding his voice, life outside of gaming, his horror game shortlist, and the lightning round. Before we get started, don't forget there are links in the episode description that you can follow to learn more about Dan as well as the podcast. Also, don't forget to like and share the episode. Without further ado, enjoy episode 106. Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Dan Morris, head of the horror game magazine Fearzine, for the third episode of New Game Plus. Hi, Dan. How are you doing today?
Hey, Link. Thanks for having me.
No worries, Dan. I'm glad to have you here. As anyone that's listening that knows or might not be fully figured out yet, New Game Plus is episodes where I speak with people that are either returning or, in your case, someone that is not fully uh, immersed or fully versed. I shouldn't say inversed or fully devoted, what have you, to making games. To being core inside the industry. So, welcome to being the first guest that is here to talk about games for being a tertiary part of the industry. I think
Uh,
tertiary might be the right word here.
Adjacent, maybe. I mean, I definitely I facilitate the delivery of games with the magazines and talking about video games, and I work very closely with game devs in a similar fashion. As far as I'm not a game dev myself, but I'm very heavily invested in game devs and the work they do, and indie games especially. So yeah, I'm not a game developer myself, not yet, at least. That's something I've dipping my toe in. But yeah, I think adjacent or tertiary is a good word as well.
Thank you for elaborating on, how it is you exist inside of the sphere. I did a horrible job at that, admittedly. And then I went to look up what tertiary means, and tertiary means third level.
Mm.
I'm only aware of it in terms of using for color theory stuff, like the color wheel. So adjacent is probably a much better word, and I I probably shouldn't have just YOLO'd with tertiary. But here
Eh,
we are.
I went with it too. I just I remember the usage of that word from an episode of Big Bang Theory where Sheldon refers to himself as a tertiary friend, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Sure.
Um, yeah, fair enough. Exactly. Uh, so Dan, before we get too far into it, now I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you mind maybe saying a little bit more about who you are, what you do, how you exist in the game sphere? Like elaborate on that, just so we have a good ground level of the who, what, where, when, how kind of things.
Oh, for sure. I'll give you a solid baseline. So essentially, I've been a lifelong gamer for a long, long, long time. And I've always wanted to do something more meaningful or some element of gaming. And I tried doing game design ages ago, went to college for it, but it didn't really click for me at the time. And in the last 6 or 7 years, I wanted to get more out there and actually do something. And I got into podcasting back in 2018 originally myself to as a way to like kind of get going into the space and the medium. And then I got into writing and doing like blog posts, working for a couple of websites, writing for a couple of things and outlets. And I've been doing my own podcast for years about games. And then I got invited to write for a magazine called Reload magazine. For those of you who know Reload, the FPS boomer shooters type of magazine, I wrote a few bits for that, and then they started a secondary side magazine called Fearzine. So the original Fearzine was actually like a sister magazine to Reload. After that first issue got shipped, the original creator stepped down and I took it over. So now I am the head of and editor in chief of Fearzine magazine. which is now its own thing. I'm expanding it and blowing it out to be its own industry slash company slash wherever we can take this thing. And now I run a magazine and I make it myself. I never knew how to do it. I had never done it before, but I'm doing it now. As my number two, Maria, which you had on the show a few weeks ago, usually quotes the like "hold my beer," like watch me do it. I'll make it happen. Um, but yeah, it's been a crazy roundabout journey way for me to kind of force my way into the industry.
So, thank you for the ground level, the baseline there. I really appreciate that because um, it's always really hard to like introduce someone and gather. Well, it should not to gather. It's really easy to gather everything, but it's really hard to like put all of that in a way that's not like a 3 minute long introduction and then just, have the person awkwardly sitting there. So thank you for rounding all those edges and like giving all the information. I don't know why I'm phrasing it like this. I feel really weird doing it that way, but I appreciate you giving the elevator pitch. Thank you very much.
It was a
Now
short version, so we're good.
um, but I am curious because you had said um that it's Fearzine, it's horror. You kind of the first person stepped down and you took it over. I'm wondering because you started with Reload and then Fearzine. I apologize. I'm gonna flip flop between Fearzine and Fearzine. Just don't mind that.
It's all good.
But
I'm used to
I'm
it.
awesome. I'm wondering like why horror? What like the transition between boom shoot and horror? Like, how did that come about?
Well, for me, at least, my take is it's a really easy answer, and that easy answer is I'm much more of a horror fan and less of a shooter, like old school, like classic or retro style shooter fan. So as much as I enjoyed working with Reload and writing for Reload, those games are like I enjoy them and they're fun, but they're definitely not like a favorite thing for me. And when the idea of a magazine that focused on horror games came around, I was like, "Oh, 1,000,000% sign me up for that. That I'm on board for this because that's my jam." And then when I got offered the chance to take over the magazine, that was one of those like click moments of I can't say no to this because there was always this thought that as soon as the idea of the magazine was presented to me, I wish I had come up with it. I wish I had thought of it because it's something that just instantly was like, yes, this is something that I should do and I want to do. And now I am doing it and I'm leading it. And for me, it's always been like horror games as one of my favorite genres. Um, it for many reasons, like the blood and gore, the violence, the puzzles, the scares, the not scares. I mean, there's so many elements, and there's horror is completely subjective. I'm also not afraid of things. Like it's really hard to scare me. I think you talked to Maria about this too a while ago, and like we're both the same way. Like we're not easily scared, but I love playing scary games. I'm always playing them like try to scare me, bring it on. Like let's see if you can make me get scared. But there's so many elements of horror games that I really enjoy, and it's a natural thing for me to be able to look at them and talk about them and like understand the different qualities and the subgenres and the nuance, and that's why I have a magazine. That's why I'm running this magazine now. It's like it's just a thing that is easy for me to just put all of my heart and soul into.
And I am also curious because if you're, the I don't know the article count. The page count I can speak a little more to just from when I quickly looked at it. The page count for Fearzine isn't small, right? It's
No.
not it's not like you're doing like, a 10-page spread and calling it a day or what have you. So I'm wondering, as someone that enjoys those kind of games, if you had the chance to find games that you didn't know existed. And like, if I'm that question might be a little weird or awkward to hear. The what I'm meaning there is like, because you like these kind of games. The presumption will be that you're always on the lookout, or if one comes across, you see it, you're like, oh, that's cool. You make a mental note of it, or what have you. But like in terms of writing articles or looking for things to write articles about, you would make the presumption that you have to go exploring to find more things, right? You can't just rely on whatever gets thrown across, you know, your desk and be like, "Oh, cool, this is new." Um, which is largely how I find out about a lot of games and such. Like, I personally go to GameStop just so I can see what games are coming out on not PC because
Mm.
I'm completely blind to it. But what I'm really asking is like, since you've started doing this, have there been any games that have, you've had to find and learn about and be like, "Oh, wow, this is really cool." And like you're glad you got to actually see it and otherwise would have, missed it.
So literally hundreds of games have become aware to my radar that I had not heard of in the last year. And I can honestly say that there's games that I had never heard of before that I've now seen or I've even played that like I feel honored to be able to experience those games, especially before other people might be able to. Or find these games that I'm like, this is really freaking cool. I can't wait to tell other people about this and show it to other people. And as far as the finding games, that's always a thing, but also the horror genre now in this day and age is exploding. It's huge. It's blowing up like crazy, especially in the indie space. There's so many new horror games every single day. We have a running list of games that we collect, and it's hundreds of lines long, and there's new games getting added all the time, and there's new games that we're learning about. And even now I watch the indie horror showcase or the horror game awards, and they're showing trailers for games I've not heard of, and I'm like, holy moly, like there's still more out there and there's still more happening that I haven't seen or I haven't been aware of. And to double back on what I was saying already, when it came to issue 1 of the magazine, I got to do a preview for this game I'd never heard of called Ground Zero. I adored I got to play an early build of the game that I absolutely adored. And even now to this day, I just found out, I talked to the developer recently. I'm one of the only people outside of their internal staff that's actually played it. And I was just like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, holy crap. Um, I've got more in the works with Ground Zero. I'm really excited about this game. It to me is like one of the most promising like retro survival horror games that's on its way, and there isn't a date set for it yet, but I'm so excited and I'm so thrilled that I was one of the first people to be able to play this game way before. I mean, no one else has actually played it yet. It hasn't even been available like publicly at all. And that to me feels so freaking special.
So, I can definitely understand that because, like, if it's something you're passionate about, getting the chance to experience it and be able to be like, I got to try this. And I don't say this in like the way that as a kid you would have been like, I listened to this band before they were cool kind of thing. Like um I don't know if that falls into gatekeeping, but either which way. But like being able to say about something you're passionate about, be like, yeah, I got to try this game, when it was coming up and it's so great. And like being able to sing its praises to people that are just learning about it.
Hmm.
Like I imagine that's such an awesome feeling. Because like you get to be a cheerleader for a game that people didn't even know there were cheerleaders for yet, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense?
Oh yeah, I fully expect that. Say in I can't give real figures because I have no idea how long it's going to take that team to finish the game, but I can already see it down the road somewhere. IGN's going to put out a thing for this game, or they're going to put out a video for it and a trailer, and suddenly it's going to blow up as like the next big indie horror game that nobody knew about. And I'm going to be sitting here going like, me, I've been talking about it for a while. I've known.
Exactly, yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm getting at, what I'm meaning. And, like, I'm also curious because, if you're a fan and for anyone that's been a fan of, like, games and, like, you've watched the different genres and such, and I've only just sort of been, like, on the outside of following horror games because 'cause I'm not a huge fan of them. I have a personal issue with them where a lot of them are put you in this position where it's like you are helpless, run away, figure it out. It's like, "There's a chair in the corner." I think I said the same thing to Maria.
Yeah, I
Like,
don't like
"There's a
those games. They're
chair there's
boring.
a yeah, there's a chair in the corner. Just let me chair the guy or
Hmm.
chair the monster, and if that doesn't work out, well, I gave it the old college try to not die," right? Um, but, like, that's my main issue with horror games is they went down a path where that was kind of the thing, where it was like,
Yeah, I
predator
call those
prey.
Heidi horror games. I don't like Heidi horror games. Those are boring.
Um,
You should check out
yeah.
this game called Upturned. The Upturned, where it's the whole premise of that game is literally you throw whatever you can find at the monsters. 1000%. You just grab it off the floor. Grab junk off the floor and throw it.
So amazing, awesome. Like, yeah, I made a note about that one. I'm gonna take a look into it because that sounds
It's very
hilarious.
silly and funny. It's a silly, funny horror game.
Even better because like when Amnesia first came out, that was actually one of my issues. Like, well, I can't defend myself. And a friend was like, I just grab stuff and smack the monster. It's like, doesn't that screw if you're insane? He's like, yeah, but I smacked the monster. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, like I'm not gonna argue with you. That is logic.
Yeah.
but but I am curious, as someone that has been following trends or following the genre or the subgenres or what have you, and like anyone that's aware, like I don't know how long it's been now because I was advocating for this subgenre before it popped off, and now it's kind of just too much. But like the whole liminal space setup,
Mm.
anyone that's aware, like that's a subgenre that's everywhere. But it is one of the more popular, as I'm aware of it, subgenres for horror. I'm wondering what your kind of subgenres are, or your types of horror games, or however you want to think about it. Like, where do you tend to look, or where do you tend to enjoy more? Obviously, like you just said, as you put it, Heidi horror or what have you. You're not a fan of them. So, like, what ones are you a fan of?
I'm a big advocate of classic retro survival horror, good old fashioned like Resident Evils, your old Silent Hills. I am a purist for tank controls and fixed camera angles. I know a lot of people do not care for those and or wish they would die, but I prefer them. I love them. I think that's a part of what makes those games special and great because it kind of puts you in almost this dream type of scenario where, yeah, it's hard to move your character because this is horror and you're not super powered. You're a regular person and you can die easily. So yeah, like if you have a nightmare, you always have that moment where you need to run away, but you can't because your legs are stuck or because you're running into something like an idiot. And that's exactly what happens in these old school horror games most of the time is, oh, it's hard to move because I can't see quite right. Or I ran into something because I couldn't see it because these stupid fixed camera angles. Like it's a trope and it was a limitation of the time of the technology, but I actually think it leans itself to what makes those games special. And this is also why the old school like PlayStation visuals, the PS1 visuals are so popular now with indie devs because there's something about older graphics that because they're muddy, because they're not clear, it left more to the imagination. So you kind of filled in the blanks with your mind and it made those games scarier. Because now when you play new games and everything is crystal clear or in 4K, crazy high resolution and crazy frame rates, there's no guessing. You know exactly what you're looking at. You're looking at the thing in the face, and it's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, like it's not that scary. It is what it is. And this is even worse with those Heidi horror games because then you're looking at the thing and it's like, all right, I see it. And then the Heidi horror games, they don't they don't kill you well enough, if that makes sense. Like the thing will catch you, it'll like shake the screen and scream at you, and then it goes game over. And it's like, oh, all right. Like if you're gonna be like that, be a Dead Space. Murder me gruesomely. Watch me get torn apart to pieces. So I'm like, oh my god, holy cow, that thing killed me bad. Like I want to see my character get eviscerated, so I actually fear getting caught by the thing. I want to be afraid. Make me
Yeah,
afraid.
yes. I understand what you're saying because otherwise it's just like it's just a jump scare and that's the end of it, right? Jump scare, fade to black. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
that's just rude and annoying. That's how I feel about jump scares. That's why I don't like jump scare games. It's not that, like, yes, I get jumped, I get spooked because they're doing their purpose, but it's like that was
they're
like,
cheap.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
it's cheap scares and it's like, cool, I didn't need to have like my ears blown. Like one of the things when I
Well, they
did
rely
play.
on shock. They rely purely on
Yes,
shock.
and when I would play some of those with a friend, 'cause the ones we tried, like 10 years ago now, like, when, Slender Man or whatever little ones were big, and they were all jump scare and they screamed at you, and, like,
Hmm.
it wasn't uncommon for me to have my headphones sitting or the game volume non-existent or have my headphones sitting, like, off my ears, And it was always a moment of like, no, I don't need my eardrums blown out, but I still need to be able to communicate because me and my friends would just be going around like idiots. So like we'd be playing, but it's like I don't need my ears to be, bleeding after this
I used to get
annoying
super
thing.
mad at slasher films for doing that because that was literally all they did was they just blast you with some loud audio stinger that made you it would shock your system and you'd jump, but like you weren't being scared, you were literally just being shocked.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Um, but yeah, no, thank you for that. I understand like the fondness for like the PS1 style where like everything was kind of intentional, but at the same time it lent itself to the low res, as well as like the movement being like a technology limitation. And like I know some games are trying to do it now, and like some of them are doing it really well, and some of them, from my experience, are doing them okay-ish. But it's like one of those things where you have to like full commit, and you have to understand that that is part of, I don't want to say the charm, because obviously it's part of the charm, but part of like the actual game controls. They're not bad, or they're not like bad intentionally. They're frustrating because of the limitations imposed and like you just doing the best that you can. And like some games don't commit to doing the best that they can. They call it good enough. And then you know, you hit like these weird issues where it's like, okay, you could have been better. Or like it's frustrating, but not for like the same reasons, right? Like, because of tank controls, they were very intentional on stop, look left, look right, or turn, sorry, right? Um, but yeah, that's one of the things I like about that style coming back from what I've tried or what I've like seen or experimented with or what have you. Whatever words you want to use,
Mhm.
demos. There we go. Plate of
Yeah.
demos is like the intention and getting the intention right. Because when it gets it right, the dev deeply understood what it was that made those games work, right? And like that's the thing I like is when you can tell that the devs understand what it is that they're playing. Not to speak ill of devs that, are working on it and they might not be able to hit it or what have you, but it's just when you play a game where all the boxes are checked and like it plays well, like that dev has like they know what they're doing and that they are treating it with respect and not just a, I'm gonna make this, but like a I'm going to do this kind of approach, if that makes sense. I rambled a bit there.
No, you're good. I'm gonna acknowledge too, like the newer style of horror games that are coming out that we're seeing with the like the AAA space too, because Capcom has pulled a massive 180 from 10 years ago or so. They were kind of like not doing great in my opinion of the games they were producing. They were outsourcing a lot of their games to third party developers, but then they kind of like took ownership and they came back with doing like Resident Evil 2 remake, Resident Evil 3 remake. Granted, most people don't like Resident Evil 3 remake. I'm not going to deny anyone that because it's very different and it's not what people hoped for. But between Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4, like those games are just they're perfect experiences. They're so well done, they're so well crafted, and they do it in such a way that it captures the essence of the original game, but puts a modern take on it, modernizes the controls, modernizes the experience, and still manages to keep the tension, still manages to keep the terror. And like I don't know how many people know this, but in Resident Evil 2 remake, part of the way that they helped manage the terror in that game was they actually created an AI system within the game that monitored how many bullets you had so that it changed how difficult the zombies were to kill based on how many bullets you had. So that way you were always just barely getting through a scenario and you always felt like, Jesus, oh my God, I almost didn't survive that. And that's by design. They did that on purpose. It wasn't like a fluke. The game does that on purpose to mess with you.
I did not know. That's actually really cool. Thank you for sharing that, because that's easily something that would create that tension. Like a really, I don't want to say this like a cheap way to create that tension or like a cheat way, but like it 100% is a way to regulate going, you don't need all these bullets, but when you're like at the wire going, you need these bullets, and like having the game adjust in such a um seamless way that like, to the average player, they're not going to catch it because they're going to be in the moment. They're going to, like you said, they're going to be like, "Oh, I just made it. I just pulled it off." So like That's really cool to know. So thank you for sharing that. Like I said, I never knew that, and that's just really cool that they created a system that, doesn't punish you, but still makes you feel on edge, you know?
Mhm. And Dead Space did a good job compensating that too in a different way with the limb severing. Whereas you usually had a lot of ammo in Dead Space, but the way they combat that is that the enemies are hard to kill because you first need to chop their limbs off and then try to get the kill shot. And that made you end up burning through ammo or wasting a lot of ammo because you're trying to like eviscerate these things before they'll die. And then of course Dead Space has one of the best like sound designs. There's a funny thing too where if you look through the history, Resident Evil and Dead Space directly influence each other back and forth. So Resident Evil 4 came out and then Dead Space was developed with taking a lot of notes from Resident Evil 4. Then Capcom, seeing what Dead Space did, iterated on that formula, and then so on and so forth. So there was like a bit of a back and forth between those studios, trying to like learning from what each other were doing.
So what I'm getting from you here is that Dead Space, in some way or another, is who we blame for Resident Evil 6.
No, not at all. I blame Resident Evil 6 for making Dead Space 3. Maybe because I don't know, like well, it's a weird transition that the horror genre has taken. As like Capcom's always been kind of at the forefront with it, but they're not the only ones. Obviously, there are other games. I don't want to give Capcom or Resident Evil all the credit and notion here, but now horror multiplayer is a huge thing, and it's getting bigger and better all the time. It's even to the point now where back to the Heidi horror, there's Outlast. I've never cared for Outlast. I played through it for the first time, I think, last year because a friend really wanted me to play it. And I'm like, but it's all Heidi horror, and I don't like that. And I literally went through that entire game just like, oh no, jump scare. All right, cool, moving on. And then there was also a part of that game that's super frustrating because you have to escape from this boss, and there was like zero logic behind his movements and how he tracked you. And I'm like, all right, this is just getting annoying and frustrating. But now there's Outlast Trials, which is a multiplayer version of Outlast, and I keep hearing how good it is, and everyone talks about how it's a fun co-op experience, and I'm like, that actually sounds interesting to me. Like, I want to check that out. I want to see what that's like, as opposed to, Dead Space 3 or Resident Evil 6 with their co-op. Granted, I like Resident Evil 6 with a little bit of an asterisk there, and I like Resident Evil 5. I actually love Resident Evil 5. I played the heck out of that game. Resident Evil 6's biggest fault is its story is just bad, and then the way it's set up with the 3 different campaigns is just not good. But it's still a solid game. It's fun. It's more like a goofy, solid or silly thing to play through rather than like a serious one. But yeah,
So
go ahead.
so what I can say about Resident Evil 6 in all earnesty is that I unfortunately did not get far enough in it to find the zombie T-Rex. And what I do remember, and what my partner remembers, not because she got to enjoy it, but because she had to sit in another room and listen to it, was me and a friend were playing it, and like the idiots that we are, learned that you can dive, and if you don't
Mm-hmm.
press the get up button, you then just butt scoot around on the
Mm-hmm.
floor.
Oh yeah, I do that. You
And
play the ice level and you can dive and then you'll slide everywhere,
um
and it's beyond silly.
I was gonna say fantastic. And what my partner got to enjoy was hearing me at like 2 a.m. yelling to my friend, "Scoot, scoot," because that's all we did for about 30 minutes was butt scoot around. After I learned that you could do this as he was dying. Um, he lived, it was fine. But like that's the only thing I really know about
But
Resident Evil 6.
did
It
you
was
have
fine
fun?
and I can butt scoot. Oh, yes, I enjoyed butt scooting around way more than I should have. There might have been some drinking involved that made it enjoyable.
Hey, that
Um,
sounds like it makes Resident Evil 6 worth playing.
if you are a fan of butt scooting around with a
I am a
gun
fan of the
drawn,
scooting. I am a big fan of the butt scoot.
then obviously it's well worth playing, right?
Hmm. Oh yeah,
um,
I got plenty like those games too. Like I have a bad habit of in Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, especially with 5 when you get to the doors where there's like a checkpoint where you have to wait for your partner. And if you press, I think it's the B button or circle on PlayStation, where it'll make your character call out to the other character. and I would literally just sit there and spam the hell out of that button, just like, "Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on." And I was like, I don't even care that I'm being annoying as hell.
Yes, at that point, it's kind of like Mario Golf or Party Rules or whatever, where you could taunt the other players when they were trying to do something,
Well, let
and
me put it this way. What is the, antithesis, if I said that right, of horror? You know, like the yin and yang of horror is comedy. You have to have comedy with horror and horror with comedy. That's the way it works. That's the best thing to do. So,
Yes, that makes perfect sense, and being able to, insert some comedy into into the moment, why not?
mhm,
Now, Dan, I am curious because I do wanna ask you this, because we've been talking, I think we just spent a lot of time just talking about horror, which is perfectly fine and
that's
valid.
what I'm here for.
But I also would like to ask about, because you said that, you went to college to try and get into game design, and then you got into writing and all of that. All of that being how we got to this point where you're writing Fearzine and, demoing games or trying games before they get released and all of that fun stuff. Um, but I'm wondering from, your experiences in all of that, if you have any words of wisdom that you are okay sharing with people, or maybe even a better way to phrase it, if you could go back to yourself when you were, about to go to college or what have you, if you had anything that you would say to yourself, maybe not to discourage you, but, give you hope for how this was going to turn out, like what would you say to yourself or other
Mhm.
people if you wanted them to be successful and maybe going down a similar route.
To start off, if I was gonna go the route of, like, going back in time and being able to, like, talk to a younger version of myself, I would tell my younger version of myself to not listen to my guidance counselors and know that there is a future in video games because that was what one of the things that was like, "Oh, I can't make a real living or a career out of video games," back, in those days. But as far as, like, advice for people now, the main thing that I would say is don't be afraid to try. Because you never know until you try. That's the biggest thing that holds people back is fear of failure. Failure is how you learn, failure is how you grow, and it's the only way to really know whether or not you can do the thing. Because that's purely exactly what I've done and how I've gotten to this point is I finally started trying. I stopped fearing and I started trying. Another thing I actually have right here is a fortune cookie fortune. It's the only one I've ever kept in my entire life, and I've been hanging on to this for years now. It says it takes a lot of time to achieve instant success. It is something that it's very unlikely that you're going to become super successful overnight, and you have to understand that there's a lot of hard work that has to go along with it, and you have to be willing to make sacrifices and put in the work.
So, thank you for sure. I like the advice that, the words of wisdom, sorry, that you shared. I shouldn't say advice because that's, it's not always advice. Um, However, I appreciate the words of wisdom that you shared because like not being afraid is a wonderful thing,
Well, to
to
clarify,
do.
let's say it's okay to be afraid. You're gonna be afraid. It's a matter of getting through the fear and pushing past it. That's the real challenge.
Yes, yes, exactly. And like, it's you're right. Being afraid is perfectly fine. You should generally, have some fear for things because, you know, I think it's crazy people that walk into situations and going, yeah, it's all gonna work out. Well, I don't have to have like an escape plan or what have you. But like just not being afraid to try, right?
Mhm.
Because like, you know, as
That's what
much
you should
as
not be afraid of. Don't be afraid to try. Never be afraid to
yeah,
try.
like as much as I hate the old like inspirational thing, shoot for the stars or shoot for the moon because you'll land amongst the stars, or as much as I hate that, like it it makes sense. And I hate saying that because I hate that
Just like the cliche.
affirmation. Yes.
Yeah.
But like, the worst that's gonna happen if you try is it doesn't work out. But at the same time, if you don't try, you
Nothing
literally
happens.
have yeah, you have the baseline is you have the exact same end result
Yeah,
in
you're
this
back to
search in
zero.
this
Mhm.
circumstance. Yeah. So like, I think that's just good wisdom to share 'cause, like, yeah, just like, yeah, your guidance counselor, um, honestly, I'm also shocked about guidance counselors existing. I'm Canadian. I don't recall ever having one. So like
Yeah,
I
I went
kind
through
of
high school with
I
stupid
kind
guidance
of
counselors.
I kind of thought guidance counselors were like a thing made up by like, TGIF, like Boy Meets World kind of shows where it's like, yeah, that can't be real. Like there can't be there can't exist one person's entire job to just be like, so this is a job, you can apply to it. This is what it does. Like, but lo and behold, they actually exist, which is wild to me. But anyway, um, like why why would you trust a guidance counselor? Like why would
Mm.
you like I want to work in games. Gaming is non-existent. Don't do it. It's like there's I just was playing Call of Duty like an hour ago. Everyone's talking about it. What do you mean you can't make money off it? Do you think they're not getting paid to do this? Like it's
Granted,
one of
this
those
was, ages ago before games really blew up and became like the big success that they are now. So, but even still, like there are avenues. I know there, like even like Cliff Blazinski's, talks about his past and how he got into making games when he was a kid, and then that spiraled into him becoming this, massive successful developer. And it's like, man, I was in that same boat as Cliff Blazinski. I didn't take the chance. I didn't take the risk. I didn't go down the rabbit hole, and then when people told me that there's no future, or like that's not a real job, you got to do a real job. And like this goes on to my parents a little bit too, is like my parents being like, you just sit in front of the video TV, push buttons. That's not a real job. But it's like it's a multi-billion-dollar industry now. People didn't know that back then.
That's to a degree, that's fair, yes. I won't argue too hardly with that it's not a shock that people that were not fully aware of the industry, even in the, like, 90s or 2000s would be hesitant to, like, want their kids
Yeah.
getting into it, Like, I imagine back then it was probably, like, the same kinda dirty word, like, liberal arts degree, right? Where it's, like, "What are you gonna do with that?" It's like, "I don't know. I'll figure it out."
Right.
At least I'm gonna try. But like, yes, I can understand what you're saying in that sense. Um, sorry, I've sidetracked myself. I forget what the other thing I was gonna say was
Well, you
now.
asked for advice.
Um, no, it was the other thing you had said. I wanted to make a comment on that. I don't remember what that comment was anymore, so
Hmm.
I'm just gonna move on. We're just gonna move on,
Move along.
pretend it didn't happen. That is on me for not writing it down like a smart
Hey, it'll come
person.
back to you, and then you can just yell it out.
See, you're right. However, the problem is it'll come back to me at like 3 a.m. and I'll wake up and yell it out, and my partner will smack me with a pillow for yelling it out at 3 a.m. in bed. Um, just waking everyone up from a dead sleep. um,
Just make sure to record it and then add it to the episode.
just with no context, no
Yep.
answer either. Just yell it out, edit it in. It'll be fine. But I'll ask this because I think this is a good question to ask, and I don't know if this is going to be like it was a horror game or another kind of game. But like when you went to college that you wanted to do game design, or even like the context of writing about games or working on Fearzine, like you can take this at any of those stages that you prefer. But like, was there a game that made you want to do that, or was it kind of just games in general?
I think it's just games in general because as far as I can think back, one of the earliest notions I've always had is I love talking about games. I've always loved sharing about games and sharing the love for games. And even when I went to college and I was learning game design, I had this kind of like notion of like, I don't know if making games is what I want to do so much as I want to talk about games. But back then, I also had this notion of like, well, I suck at writing. And I don't want to go to college for writing because, like, I mean, even when I was in college and I was taking like my English classes, I'm writing formal, college essays and stuff. I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. This is dumb. But then, like, it took years of listening to other journalists and seeing how actual, journalists in the space write and how they cover things. And I remember at a time when I was a kid, especially when the PS2 came out, I did this thing where I started a journal about PS2 games, and I would go to Blockbuster. I'm aging myself hard right now. I would go to Blockbuster and I would rent a game and I would play that game, and then in my journal I would write like a review. I would do like a mock review in this journal, I was trying to like mimic some of my favorite gaming magazines back in the day, like the Game Informers and the Game Pros and Nintendo Power and whatnot. But I always thought I'm no good at this. This isn't a thing I can do. This is not me because I'm not a good writer. But I also didn't really take education very seriously at this point in my life. It wasn't until years later that I took education a lot more serious, and I focused a lot harder on my experiences and what I learned and how to adapt that information. And even now, like I went back to school years later, and I remember being like 23, 24, maybe 25 years old in a college class with kids who were fresh out of high school, and all they did was mess around and joke and laugh and, piss about and not listen to the teacher. And I'm sitting there like, these kids are stupid. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, we're here to learn. I'm here to learn. Shut up. I remember being in a history class and the teacher talking about like Greek mythology, and she mentioned some Greek mythology like creatures and things. And I feel like she talked about a Medusa, and she asked if anyone in the who knew what a Medusa was. I was the only one that raised my hand, and she called on me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's like the lady with a snake in her hair and like snake hair." And no, it was a gorgon. She said gorgon. That was what it was. Nobody knew what a gorgon was because that's what Medusa is a gorgon. So literally, like I'm answering this question, and then this kid next to me looks at me and goes, "How did you know that?" I go, "How do you not know that?" Like,
So, sorry, I did not mean to cut you off there.
nah, you're fine. I'm going off on a wild tangent about nonsense here anyway. So
Uh, so as someone that graduated school in like 2009, and like a few years later went back to school at like 23, um, 23, 24, I can relate empathetically to what you went through there. Um, maybe not as, sitting there where someone's like, "Does anyone know what a Gorgon is?" Because, that would be hilarious. Just because like I feel like that's a deep cut. Just because that's, most people, I shouldn't say everyone, most people know what Medusa is. They don't know she's a Gorgon, but like they know what Medusa is. But like to call on Gorgon explicitly is just a deep cut in my mind. But I understand the understand like sitting there going like, y'all are paying for this, right?
yeah,
Like
right.
someone's writing this check. Meanwhile, one person is screaming like, I'm gonna tell my mom about this, and they're gonna call, and the teacher's like, just get out. Like, yeah, have your mom call me. We'll see how that goes, slamming the door in their face. That happened, by the way, no less than 3 times with one student. I don't understand. And this was like, by the final time it happened, they were like 21, 22. So it was like the final year. I don't know what's going on with some people in their brains. Anyway, um, what I do want to ask though, outside of like the weird little tangent there, is as someone that, that does their own little like e-zine where they write some stuff, little reviews or what have you, and probably struggles with the exact same thing that you may have or that you still do struggle with or what have you. I'm wondering what your take is on finding your voice. Cuz like at some point, you're writing, but you're writing and you're like, "Oh, this is how I think it should be." But like the way you should be writing is at odds with it, right? So like I'm
Mm.
wondering, was there a moment that you're like, this is my voice and this is what I should be doing? Or like just in general, speaking to the idea of finding what is or what was your voice, or what is or how your voice presents itself. I shouldn't say what was because you're still doing it.
Sure. No, I get that. And like, I can actually kind of not pinpoint it so much, but there was definitely a time when I had started getting into writing professionally, and I had trying to learn the way that you would write and the way that you should write when it comes to writing professionally. And I had joined a group of professional game journalists on Facebook. Like, there's some people, like names that in this group. And when I started writing, I wrote a piece about Hellblade and the Xbox, and because this was after Xbox had purchased or at least acquired Ninja Theory, and they made Hellblade like a first party game, and they were going to be developing Hellblade 2. And I wrote this piece back. This was like 2020 or 2021 about what I feel about Hellblade and why I think it's a great series and why I think it'll matter for Xbox. And I was comparing it to God of War. And meanwhile, as far as the level of my writing goes, the way I was writing the piece was very personal to me, and I was writing it from an I perspective, with a lot of like I feel this, I think that, which was at the time incredibly frowned upon by industry veterans because that's not how you professionally write. You don't write from an I perspective. And I shared that article in this group and asked people for feedback. And most people were not nice. Most people were very scathing. Most people like tore me apart on some of my etiquette and my writing style, especially the I perspective, and smashing and slandering me for using an I perspective. And I tried to tell them that like that's the voice of the website that this is for. And some people were like, "Oh, okay, I guess that makes sense." There were some people who gave me like proper criticism and actually like, this is what you should have done here. This is how you should have done that. And every time I'd always come back with like, thank you. I appreciate you giving me actual critical feedback. And there was I can't remember who it was, but there was actually a person that responded to my saying thank you. And they said the simple fact that you're able to receive criticism and feedback like this speaks volumes. And I'm like, well, what, that's the whole point. That's why I'm here. That's why I asked you guys for feedback. I want to know what I can do better. I want to know how to improve. That the only way to do that is to present in front of my peers, just like scientists do, with a scientific method. And that's how I learned and developed my skills. And even now, I write very strongly from a personal I perspective. Not always, not 100%. But if there's a funny thing that in the last couple of years, if you notice, if you look at larger outlets like IGN and Kotaku, the vast majority of their articles have switched to an I perspective because they're trying to keep up with the trends of what is happening, with the space that we're in now with TikToks and YouTube and social feeds and all that. Like they're trying to keep up with that mentality. So it makes me laugh that a few years ago I was ostracized for this. And now it's kind of the common way that people do it. So
So, oh,
like, if that answers the question, I don't know.
yes, it does. I think if I'm gonna, I'm gonna take a swing at um, rephrasing it in a way that I understand. And by all means, I apologize if if I out to lunch, I missed what you were really saying or the intent of what you were saying. But to me, it what that translates to is like, you know, you're obviously going to do what feels comfortable to you, and only you can know what's going to be comfortable to you. And for you, you were writing from a very personal space, and it's I can relate to wanting to write from a personal space or perspective and struggling with how you don't make that a lot of like how you feel. Saying like I felt this, I felt that, or I think this, or like what have you. Because it's really hard to be personal but speak in a nondescript's the wrong word, but like speak from a place that's not personal, an impersonal perspective or tone while you're like trying to say why something means a lot to you. Um, so like I understand, I think I understand what you're saying in that, you know, if only you know what your tone is, only you know what your intent is, and just being true to the intent and being willing to learn and grow from places that aren't gonna be at odds with your intent is kind of how you, like, land on or refine, right? Because I'm as anyone that's made games, anyone that's existed in any kind of creative field, um, will be able to attest to, there are people that will give horrible, uh criticism, be like, "I didn't like this." "Well, why?" "I didn't." It's like, "Cool, your voice means nothing to me right now, go away." And I say that from a perspective of going through for graphic design and having to sit through critiques with with other students where that
Yeah,
was
you
their
have to. It's
critique.
part of it. It's how you grow
Yeah,
and become professional.
yeah, and but, like, having the person being like, "Well, I just don't like it." It's like, "Cool, then."
Yeah, but
Y
why?
Yeah, like, express yourself. If you think I can do something better, by all means, be constructive. Otherwise, just zip it and go
Mm.
away. I don't
And
care.
I've seen a lot of the same in the writing space. I've offered people help and advice with their writing too. And even before my writing was even any significant level, like I don't consider myself an excellent writer by any means, but I feel very strongly about my stance on writing and how I deliver my opinions on things. And I've had people who show me something that they've written, and it won't necessarily be a bad thing, and I'll say like, okay, this isn't bad, but there's some things that you need to do better to help the reader because you're doing this or you're doing that, and it's kind of leaving me behind. Like I'm not keeping up with you and where your mind is or where you're trying to go with this, what your point of view is. And I'm like just making simple suggestions on how you reword things or how you structure things, or maybe you got a little redundant and you're kind of killing, like beating the horse kind of thing. And I've had those people where I try to help with that, and then they'll come back and they get mad and they start like going off and like getting upset with me. And I'm like, this is proper feedback. Did you want me to just tell you, yeah, it's great and move on? You're just looking for acceptance at that point. You're not looking to grow. You just want me to say it's pretty and shiny so you can feel good about yourself. That doesn't help you become a better writer or author or artist or whatever it is you're working on, whatever pursuit you're going after.
Yes, yes, exactly, yes. Um, but no, anyway, I
Mhm.
thank you for speaking to, like, realizing or honing your voice or however it should or could be phrased. Sorry, I always struggle with, like, that sometimes because like, some words are inherently dismissive and you know, the way that I sometimes speak of things, it's not dismissive intentionally, it's just it can be interpreted that way, but thank you for
As a
speaking
person who
to
has a
that.
very monotone, deadpan voice, you don't have to worry about me because a lot of times people think I'm just pissed off all the time just because of the way my voice sounds. So I actually have to force myself to change the inflection of my voice from time to time, or else people think I'm just mad all the time. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's just my voice. I'm sorry, I can't help it.
So I thank you, I appreciate you, understanding for different reasons, but still knowing where I'm coming from, so thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a
Um,
similar vein.
yes, yes, it really is, and what really sucks is apparently it's a Canadian thing to just use, and say, like, things like, "Oh, no, all that," or what have you, like, just to, hand wave it away. And it's not meaning it in like a negative way. It's just all that other stuff. I'm not going to recap it, but all that other stuff. Like moving on anyway. Anyway.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm just about to do it again. But
Let it
anyway,
rip.
thank you. So Dan, I've kept you here for about an hour ish. I do want to bug you with a few more things before I, shut up and let you get on with your Sunday evening, if that's okay. And the one thing I want to ask about, is I always like to focus on people and their lives outside of gaming or what have you. So like, what do you do outside of gaming? How do you relax? And if the answer is, "Oh, I just play games," completely valid. However, I always feel bad if I don't ask someone, about who they are outside of the space.
Yeah, sounds good. I will do a quick little side tangent before I answer your question. That is going to be to tell you that I appreciate your stance with your show and how you are trying to add positivity within the medium because I feel exactly the same way. So thank you, Link, for that. And thank you for trying to do something that's not toxic, that's not negativity, because that's something that I believe in and that's what I stand for. So just wanted to say that real quick. And now I'll answer your question. Um, I mostly game. I do a lot of video games. Uh, that's pretty much my life in a nutshell. I game for work. I game for passion. I game for pleasure and relaxation. Um, for the most part, when I'm not gaming, though, I do try to stay pretty active. I try to take care of myself. I do try to exercise as often as I can and stay fit. I do appreciate and enjoy, getting outside and touching grass once in a while. And I do that with my dogs. I have 5 dogs, 3 of which are big dogs. I have a German Shepherd, a Husky, and then a Shepherd mix with something we don't know quite yet, but they're all very large. and I very much enjoy getting out and letting them go for walkies and getting outside and enjoying some sunshine and fresh air and disconnecting from all the electronics that I stare at all day. But I do enjoy a bit of like TV and books here and there. I don't get to get into some of my passions as much as I would have liked, like outside of gaming. It's a weird struggle that I go through sometimes where I have to actually like stop myself from just turning on a console or a video game and be like, what else should I be doing right now, or what else could I be doing, and try to spend a little bit more time either reading or maybe watching a show I've heard is really good and catching up on that. I don't watch movies or TV nearly as much as I used to. Um, and even when I do watch a movie, I tend to zone out really fast. So it's a weird thing that I'm like, I always like movies and I like TV, but unless if it doesn't grab me really fast, I can zone out really easily, or I get distracted easily by notifications and work stuff happening. So it, as of right now, it's tough just because I'm so busy with everything with the magazine. But ideally, hopefully, I'll get to a point where I can actually like maybe go on some hiking or go biking once in a while, actually get outside and do something physical. I would love to travel more. That's something I'm really looking forward to in the near future, that I can start traveling again and maybe visiting family.
So, thank you for sharing that. And as someone that turned 37, sorry, the hesitation is because I don't remember. I can relate to a good chunk of that, especially the wanting to try and stay healthy or give it the old college try to be healthy. Because, um, sometimes it's little things like just saying, hey, I'm not going to use as much sugar in my Kool-Aid mix or whatever, right? Like little victories or like
Hmm.
what have you. But then actively also trying to carve out time to go on walks, which you have three very big and sounds like two maybe small or definitely two smaller, but three very big reasons to do that. So at least you
Hmm.
have something that's like an external push to be outside and as you said, touch grass. Um and like I hope that once everything mellows out might not be the right word. Once, you find the ebb and flow of everything, because as anyone that leads a busy life or has stuff constantly bombarding against their existence, they know that like being not being busy, you're not busy intentionally. You're busy because of all of the things that just exist, right? So like hopefully once you figure out the ebb and the flow, you can enjoy some of those other things that, bring you joy, that make you happy and help you relax. Cuz, not to say gaming isn't a good thing, but as someone who has a healthy backlog of model kits, I would like to be able I assume just like myself, others would very much also like to be able to explore the other things that they enjoy in life for, the myriad of reasons that they enjoy them, right?
Absolutely.
So, Dan, as I said, I didn't want to take up too much more time. I want to hit you with one quick um I don't want to say like a top 10 or like a hard set cap limit on this one, but you can give as many answers as you want. But seeing as I'm talking with someone that is knowledgeable in the horror game field, I'm wondering if there's like a short list or what have you of horror games that if people were like, I would like to get into them, or they would like to explore them, or maybe just they're unaware of, or however you wish to take this, if there was like a short list of horror games you think people should check out.
Hmm, that's a tough one. I have so many. That's why it's tough. It's hard because there's so many great horror games out there, and I hate to like look over things just because it's not present in my mind right now. I have a massive collection, and that's actually I was gonna say that's another thing I do is I collect games now. I'm a game collector, and there's so many games that I would love for people to check out for many reasons. Of course, there's a lot of caveats as to what personal preferences people have, but for me, um, my number one go to for anything horror is always the original Resident Evil 2. That's one of my all-time favorite games. That's the one I think that most people should play if they've never played anything. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of love out there for like the Silent Hill games, and there's reasons that people should try those, especially Silent Hill 2, because it's one of the most crazy like atmospheric horror games, but it's also like obtuse as hell. So it's really easy to like lose what actually makes that game special. It I literally had to watch explainer videos to get the full sense of everything that's going on in that game. It's very, very deep baked into everything, and it's like it's really easy to miss the subtleties. But let's see some other my favorite. There's good survival horror, there's good action horror, there's good like cute horror. I love Luigi's Mansion. I Now that I'm thinking about like cute horror, like Luigi's Mansion is great. It's one of my favorite like Nintendo GameCube games. I also like Eternal Darkness a lot, which is another obscure GameCube game. And like I mentioned Dead Space plenty of times. Dead Space is also up there in my list of like some of the best horror ever. The original, like the remake is good too, and it's as good as the original, but I have a sweet spot for the original. Dead Space 2 is fantastic. Alien Isolation, I have to stress with Alien Isolation because Alien Isolation is one of those games that does hidey horror, but makes it not suck. Everyone I know, everyone who's a fan, everyone who's with a part of Fearzine acknowledges Alien Isolation, or they say it's one of their favorite horror games of all time, and there's good reason for it because they did it right. Where in most hidey horror games, there's the one monster that you hide from, and that's it. That's the game. In Alien Isolation, there's the alien, which is the monster, but then there's also people, there's androids, there's other things that you have to worry about, and those other things you can defend yourself from. You can fight them, you can fight back, but the alien will kill you on sight, essentially. And it's so well done. It's so incredibly intuitive. And even now, it holds up. It's a 10-year-old, almost 11-year-old game at this point, and it's an incredible, incredible horror experience. I also have a sweet spot for Resident Evil 1 Remake, mostly because I say this a lot. I think it's one of the best horror games ever made because of its atmosphere and what it did to revolutionize what they did with the original games. They took the original formula and just made it 100 times better. They took the original game, they reworked it from the ground up. They gave you the exact same. It's the same game in a nutshell, but the visuals are completely revamped. It went from being a really bright game. The original Resident Evil game is really bright and like well lit to like everything is dark, but it's so well lit that it feels really real and really natural. And then they added things to that game that if you had played the original game to death, there were surprises in the new game. And oh my god, it's so good. It's so well put together. It's so fun for me at least. Like again, the classic tank controls. The zombies are nuts in that game. I love getting headshots and watching a zombie's head explode. And then they throw in Crimson Head zombies on top of that, which no one saw coming. For those that don't know, a Crimson Head zombie in Resident Evil 1 is a zombie that died and then comes back as a super zombie that's harder to kill. And it's the best thing ever that will make you, even a diehard Resident Evil or survival horror fan, squeal like, "What the hell? I already killed you!" It's so good. Yeah, I don't know how short of a list that is, but I could go on probably forever.
That was a handful, a good handful. So,
It was a solid, plumpy handful,
yes, a solid,
juicy,
bumpy handful.
meaty handful.
But, Dan, I appreciate you giving that handful all the same. Regardless of how many were in there, I always appreciate any kind of recommendation or direction, especially on the spot. As someone that has had those kind of questions thrown at them and just went, I don't know, the best I can give you is, Bug Bumble or something, right? Like, you want deep cuts, I don't know, Bug Bumble. Like, as someone that has been there, I can appreciate, you know, any amount that you put in my hand there. So thank you. I appreciate that. Now, before I do let you go, I do want to hit you up with some lightning round questions. Now, these are lighthearted, they're nonsensical. They potentially can make no sense and they can potentially make even less than no sense. So,
Perfect.
just giving you that heads up now before we walk into this. And they are meant to just be quick and easy. So don't worry about thinking too hard on them. Don't try and build out a solid what
I'm
have
not
you.
thinking hard at all. Don't you worry.
beautiful, because
I'm
this
still
will,
running through games in my head that I should have talked about.
you know, well, even better, because this, you might need to draw on some of those games for the potential of these questions. So, to start with, if Mario was a jelly bean, what flavor would he be? And would he be a real flavor or one of those trick flavors?
Pepperoni. He would be pepperoni flavored jelly bean.
That's a very solid
And he
and
would
good
go, "Wow,
answer.
that's a spicy meatball." And but like, no, it's not a meatball. It's a pepperoni. Oh, all right.
Thank you. Thank you. That, I would be very scared of a talking jelly bean, regardless of how accurate it was when it yelled anything at me. Which video game character do you think is most likely to assume that claustrophobia is a fear of crabs?
uh, I'm gonna say Blinks the Time Sweeper because he is a cat and he would try to push off claustrophobia as not having to do with cats and people being afraid of cat claws.
Fair enough. Fair enough. He'd take it the other way just for his
Yeah,
own benefit.
right. Because he doesn't want people to look down on him and his cat claws.
Sorry, I'm trying just to find one that I hope is less nonsense. Here we go. I'm hoping this one will feed a little better into the horror games you were thinking of. So, which video game character do you feel is most likely to text a picture of their feet at 2 a.m. and ask, "Do these look the same size to you?"
I'm trying really hard to not think too hard about it, but I want to because I'm like legitimately trying to think of what character would do that. Hmm. I almost want to say something like Lara Croft, but then there'd be like a hidden like boob shot in there somewhere, and she'd actually be talking about her boobs. Be like
So,
they might be the same size, but they're awfully pointy.
so you're taking it for the approach that, you know. So here's the thing. You're taking this in the thirst trap question, which is perfectly valid. They could be doing that. So, that's very valid. I'm not going to turn my nose up to that as an answer. But Dan, outside of that, those were like the three lightning round questions, the as nonsensical or confusing as they may or may not be. So I appreciate you, toughing that out for me. And as I said it before, I've kept you here for about an hour and I don't want to steal too much more of your time. However, if there was anything else you did want to discuss, another cool game that that is on the top of your head that you think people should know more about, or just what else you're doing, or just something you feel more people should just be more aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. As well, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you, and I'll also include that in the episode description.
You should not have given me the floor because it's gonna go down. I will be here forever now. I'm literally like thinking about all the things like I wanted to shout out like Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is one of the greatest, action horror games out there. The remake is incredible. Um, I was thinking about like some of the other things that we had talked about possibly getting into, and like you were talking about like what's your current favorite game. Right now, I've been spending a lot of my downtime playing Ninja Gaiden 2 Black after they announced it and released it through Xbox and Game Pass. I absolutely adore Ninja Gaiden. It's one of my favorite action games of all time. I'm so incredibly happy that they released a new updated version of the game. It's freaking beautiful. It's super juicy. And when I say juicy, I mean the guys gush blood everywhere when you chop their limbs off. And I love it because that's what Ninja Gaiden 2 was when it first came out. The original Ninja Gaiden 2 was very meaty, very juicy, and very chunky. And they kind of ruined it in Sigma. So I'm so glad that they kind of restored it. I'm super pumped that there's a new Ninja Gaiden game in development and it's being spearheaded by Platinum Games. I'm so incredibly happy and excited to do that. I was gonna say too, like as far as like favorite genres, like it's a tie between horror and action games. I love a good action game like Ninja Gaiden and Devil May Cry, and then Devil May Cry kind of like leans on horror a little bit, and then you've got like Bloodborne, which leans on horror, but the eldritch H.P. Lovecraftianness of it all. But yeah, I should wrap myself up before the cane comes and chokes me off stage. To do a little self promo, I would absolutely love if anyone were to check out Fearzine, fearzinemagazine.com. That's the website where we're building up our platform to be able to make the magazine available in mass. We're working on trying to make the magazine purchasable and shippable across the globe so you can have your own piece of awesomeness that tells you all about all the horror games that you will never be able to play because there are just too many. But that's why we're here. That's why we have the magazine to show you the games that you should at least take a look at, see if it gets your attention and if it vibes with you. And I myself also have a podcast that's launching soon and probably will be out by the time you're listening to this. That show is called Building Horror, and I'm doing kind of a similar approach to you, Link, where I'm talking to game devs about horror games and the games that they're making. And I'm incredibly excited. It's been a fantastic, fun ride. I love talking to the developers. I love hearing about their stories. I love humanizing them and giving them a voice so that people can learn about their journeys and their experiences and how they got into game development and why they're making horror games. And we have a lot of fun. And I can't wait for people to start listening in on that show.
So,
Um,
sorry, I thought you were done there. Please
I
continue.
just
I
remember. I
apologize.
know. I just remembered we will have a Kickstarter for Fearzine again in the near future. I can't say officially yet, but we're leaning towards March. So if anyone wants to support the magazine beyond just trying to buy it on the website, we have our Kickstarter coming in March, and we're gonna have a lot of cool stuff lined up for that I can't wait to share.
Awesome. So, I can't say for certain when this episode will be out. However, regardless of that, I'll be sure to, yell at people that you have the Kickstarter for what I believe is volume 3, or
Hmm.
however you are terming issue 3, what have you. But definitely if this episode comes out in that period, 100% people should check that out. They'll have the easiest opportunity, but I feel remiss if I did not create a time or the ability for people to find that. So 100%, I'll let people know, regardless of when this comes out, that they should check that out if they are a fan of horror games and supporting printed media or however that all forms together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
as well, I will say, just very quickly off of the topic of Ninja Gaiden, I was unaware that the PlayStation version was somehow stepped down.
Oh,
Because
really?
as someone that played the PlayStation version, it did not feel stepped down, and that I don't know the appropriate word. Scares me
I
that
hadn't heard that. That's the PS version was stepped down.
well, you had said the one that Sigma was not, and Sigma was the PlayStation version, I believe.
Oh, right, yeah, the Sigma well, I mean, Sigma's had multiple releases, but originally, yes, it was a PlayStation exclusive version of the game that is not nearly as good as the original.
And that's what I was meaning by step down in
Yeah.
that sense. So, as someone that played Sigma and thought that it was over the top, I am. I should definitely check out Black and see have my definition of over the top redefined. Because if it
Black is
was
the ultimate edition of the game. It's the best way to experience it.
which is definitely good to know because when I played the PlayStation 3 version, I was giddy with excitement at the amount of gore and the amount of um senseless violence that you were able to instill
You need to
as you were
revisit Sigma now and think about it because if you go back to Sigma and watch and play it now, you're going to realize there's not as much gore because in Sigma they replaced the blood with light and flashes and things that aren't as much blood. Like it's a lot less blood and it's a lot less gore.
you
It's
know
gonna
I'm I'm
be like, oh,
I'm yes, exactly. I'm realizing at this point that it could very much have been me projecting at what it was, interpreting what it was just for the excitement of some of the action.
I've actually made a
However,
comparison video of original Ninja Gaiden 2 versus Sigma, and you can see like side by side how different they are.
I'll check that. I'll get that from you after to check that out before I go to black because now I want a refresher because like I said, when I first played Sigma, I thought it was I thought it was gory, was visceral, and I'm looking forward to seeing how wrong I was or what my where my level of visceral was in my memory here, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Um, but outside of that though, 100%, easily gonna put throw the website and the your upcoming podcast building horror so people can follow that, track that, and like, learn more about horror game devs and like the horror games that are upcoming. Because for people that like those things, like those kind of games, I'm not saying that in a dismissive way, but like that's always a valuable resource to have something that's focused on, hey, this is this is very much up your alley. You know
And
what
those
I mean? So
conversations are so much more than just talking about horror games too. Like, yeah, we do talk about horror a lot and it's a big part of the conversations, but we also talk a lot about just game design and development in general, as well as how people found themselves doing game design and getting into game design. So we do have some pretty deep and like personal and fun conversations in general. So there's definitely something there for people who aren't just diehard horror fans.
So, even more reason for people to check it out then, right?
Hmm.
But outside of that, Dan, I don't want to steal too much more of your time. And I do apologize that we didn't get to all
Hmm.
of the questions. Maybe in the future we can, you can come back on if we have time and we can revisit these questions. So that way, if anyone's curious, they can learn more about the stuff that, that just unfortunately didn't make it. You know what I mean?
Well, if your audience demands it, I will be back by
you know,
popular demand.
I would like to say by popular demand, that's usually my demand. I'm the one that usually makes the decision. So, you know, regardless, if you're up for it, I will bring you back sometime in the future and we can hit again on the questions that we didn't have a chance to get to.
I
Okay.
never get tired about talking about video games, so I'm here.
Awesome. Awesome. But for today, like I said, for this Sunday evening, I do want to let you get on with your evening. I do want to let you relax before the week restarts and all that, all the fun stuff that goes along with a new week starting. So yeah, so I don't want to steal any more time. So if there wasn't anything else, I will 100% let you go.
I think we did it. I think we got there. High five.
Awesome. High five. Yes. So yeah, so Dan, then with that in mind, I will 100% let you go and you can enjoy and relax for the rest of the weekend.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
So thanks again to Dan for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Road Steep. And be sure to check out the episode description for links to socials, websites, and other means that will allow you to learn more about or support Dan and the podcast. While you're doing that, share, like, follow, and whatever else you think makes the algorithm work. Thanks. Till next time.